There was a Nintendo Direct recently in June of 2023. It contained quite a lot of Mario content that not only had me excited, but also confused me. It confused me a lot. The Mario Mandates is the idea that ever since the late 2000s, Nintendo has become a lot more strict in terms of handling the Mario IP after several games became too quote-unquote liberal with the IP after several games such as Super Paper Mario and Mario Strikers. This caused a IP team of sorts to be created that would make sure that the games had to be a perfect squeaky clean image of the Mario brand. These mandates would make Mario games appear much more lifeless and not creative compared to the earlier games, and seem to affect the Paper Mario franchise the most. A lot of people think since the Switch era, the mandates are mostly gone now, excluding Paper Mario. In general, the Switch seems to be more pumping out incredibly new entries for IPs that were stale in the Wii U era before it. This was the case with 3D Mario with Super Mario Odyssey, and is shaping up to be the same with 2D Mario with Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Something I'll need to clarify, the existence of these mandates is completely unknown and is up to interpretation. I'll give my own thoughts later in the video, but you're entitled to believe they exist or don't. I'm not stopping you or trying to convince you to one side, I'm just trying to make an analysis. Feel free to disagree with anything I say. One major flaw we'll be talking about is that the concept of these mandates is that it's very unclear who exactly it applies to. Many generally interpret that it affects all Mario game devs, whether they're the mainline team or third-party teams, although some think it's second and third-party studios, which only includes spin-offs. Some believe it's only Paper Mario, and some just don't believe it at all. These mandates cause massive debates among the Mario community, mostly the Paper Mario community. These mandates have ruined these series for many fans due to the lack of characters and interesting plots, which there was a lack of in recent entries compared to the first 3 Paper Mario games. Okay, now everyone's caught up to speed a bit. I'll mention more as we go on. With this video, I plan to go over how the most recent Nintendo Direct may be disproving the existence of these mandates according to some, then I'll go over my both sides of the argument and then give my overall thoughts. Before we get into the Direct, however, I wanted to clarify something. If you're subscribed to me, you may already know I was making a little timeline series out of this trying to make sense of the mandates, but this Direct in itself has changed a lot about how I think of the mandates. Even in general, there's a lot that I'd think I'd want to change about the first part, so I've unlisted the first part as I do eventually plan to revisit the series, but with a fresh start once I fully wrap my head around this whole mess. Now with everything out of the way, let's talk about how the recent Direct may have changed how many think about the Mario mandates and the mandates overall. Let's start by going over the announcements that are notable to this video. First, we got the announcement of a full remake of Super Mario RPG, and then the announcement of a new 2D Mario game, Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Let's first look at Super Mario RPG. Back in the late 90s, Square Enix and Nintendo teamed up to make an RPG starring Mario, and it ended up being Mario RPG. It was witty, unique, fun, and most importantly for us, creative. There were new variations of existing characters and completely new characters. An intriguing plot and scenarios, it was great. While a vast majority of fans wanted a remake to happen, some didn't because they were worried a lot of the creativity and soul from the game would be removed due to the Mario mandates. In Superstar Saga, when that got remade for the 3DS in 2017, a lot of its variations of pre-existing characters were undone and it went a lot more generic feeling. It could be possible these decisions were made to budget more and not need to make more sprites. The developers were doing poor financially at the time and sprite art is known to be the most time consuming for them. But regardless, some were hesitant to see a remake of Mario RPG due to things like that. So the remake was announced at the June 2023 Direct, and it was the best case scenario. All of the original designs stayed the exact same. Everything was completely loyal to the original. Many point this out immediately to add more fuel to the fire that the mandates never existed. But using loopholes, it could be true remakes don't apply to the mandates, but as I mentioned, we don't know the definitive details to how these mandates work. Before we dive too deep, let's talk about the other announcement, Super Mario Bros. Wonder. Some more backstory for people who don't already know, modern 2D Mario is known for being the most stale Nintendo IP of these past 2 decades. More specifically, the new Super Mario Bros. Games. The first 2 were justified, with the DS one being the first 2D Mario game in a hot minute and introducing us to the series with the new 2.5D art style. Wii was basically the same thing with a lot less creativity, just focusing more on plain fun, which is still perfectly fine in its own right, It just didn't appeal to more hardcore Mario fans due to the lack of new things compared to DS, besides multiplayer, which is the main justification for Wii existing. Then there's Wii U and 2, which were a lot more stale and unoriginal. Don't get me wrong, I love them both, and I have fond memories of playing Wii U, but it became clear enough the series wasn't innovative enough and was just playing it way too safe with barely any game-changing gimmicks, a repetitive and bland art style, the same bosses for 3 games in a row, no unique level themes. You get the point. I'm sorry if I'm coming off too harsh, trust me, I do enjoy these games, but they also were way too stale and repetitive for my liking. It's a Mario game. The last entry was Wii U back in 2012, and there hasn't been a new 2D Mario, not counting the port of Wii U to Switch in 2019, and not the 2 Mario Maker games. Nintendo knew they had to make another entry a lot more creative, especially with Mario Maker giving fans tools to make their own levels. If they want to justify selling a $60 2D Mario game, it had to be unique, something that could never be made in a level editor, something that would surprise players new and old, something that was actually new. And after 11 years, that's what they did, a game that was creative, unique, quirky, and definitely couldn't be made in Mario Maker. It was everything fans wanted, myself included. It was so much, I'd argue it was more unique than most fans even expected. Nintendo took it to heart, and a lot of the marketing for the game seemed to be about it being the unexpected. So many unique characters and enemies, gimmicks, and new vibrant art style, I could go on. But now it's time to go back to being a Mario Mandates video. The point is, after all of the new Super Mario Bros. Series, people were shocked to see Mario taking so many creative liberties with this one. Many use this as evidence with the mandates not being real, at least not anymore. Now that we've got the gist of both games, I'll elaborate that people have started debating all over again if the mandates are real or not. Because those 2 games were hard evidence of it being fake, or gone at least. But with so much information on both sides of the argument, especially considering we don't know exactly who it affects and in what ways, online arguments ensue fast. Now, I am no expert on these quote-unquote mandates. Yes, I've been fascinated with something like this existing for a while now, but there's a lot of interviews and games and characters that I might not even heard of, so don't take my words for fact. Everything I say is hypothetical, obviously. I want to look through both sides of the argument and try and defend both sides. Then by the end, see which side has more evidence or what seems to make the most logical sense. First I'll go over how the mandates could be real, and then I'll go over how they couldn't be real. Once more, I'm not looking to make any debate, just looking from an outside perspective for fun. Now let's start. How could I prove the mandates are real? Well, obviously, to begin with, the way how generic the majority of Mario's stuff became in the late 2000s. Early 2000s was very visible. The new Super Mario Bros. Games, the sports games becoming less creative, Mario Galaxy 2 toning down heavily on the story, 3D Land and World not even having much of one, and not to mention the lack of new characters really outside a few exceptions. The only massive outlier I see in this time frame was Mario Luigi Dream Team, having several different races and unique species, but that may be because they got away with it due to the concept of the game being away from the Mushroom Kingdom universe, and higher-ups at Nintendo thought it would be fine, especially since a lot of the new characters were expansions or modifications of previous characters in the series. And then there's poor Paper Mario. After a strange yet surprisingly good game in the series with a very deep and dark plot, the next entry, Sticker Star, didn't have any plot and no new characters. In fact, 90% of the characters are Toads. It did have the bare minimum for the series, known for having involved plots and interesting characters. According to series producer Kensuke Tanabe, the team was no longer allowed to modify pre-existing Mario characters, nor make new characters in the Mario universe ever since Sticker Star. That quote right there confirms, at least to some small degree, some form that the mandates were real. Whether it was Miyamoto, an IP team, Tanabe himself, or some other guy at Nintendo or Intelligent Systems, someone enforced something. The Mario vs. DK games were only getting more and more soulless and bland as they went on, with bare minimum effort in general. It was justified, obviously. The games weren't made to be super big or anything, but I mean, like, this is the entire story in Tipping Stars.
Help! Help! Hey, come back here!
At this point, just start the game, don't even add a plot. As we move closer to entering the Switch era, something strange happens. We get Mario Odyssey, a completely unique 3D Mario game with several new environments and characters. It was a superb game. People marked it the end of these supposed mandates. In order to defend the mandates now, I need to put my tinfoil hat on. Hypothetically, what if the mandates don't affect first-party Nintendo? This would make most sense. The reason for 3D Land, World, and 2D Mario games being stale in terms of uniqueness is because they're just trying to appeal to the casual audience and brand recognition, which makes perfect sense. It was a decision by the devs to make it more generic, not an IP protection team. During this time period, there were remakes of the first and third entry in the Mario & Luigi RPGs. Another Mario RPG series that had been very creative in the first 4 entries, but the 5th one toned it down to a modern Paper Mario level. The developers, Alpha Dream, assured fans this was their own decision to do this with that title though. So either they're telling the truth and they don't have a close enough relationship with Nintendo that they don't need mandates, or they were lying. Then the developers made 2 remakes, one of Superstar Saga and one of Bowser's Inside Story. It was seen that a lot of sprites were modified to keep character designs in check with their original versions, which does prove they could be real for Alpha Dream in some capacity. Original characters from original games were also kept the same, like Midbus and Fawful. But this made sense, as the mandates surely couldn't affect essential characters, only slightly modified pre-existing characters like Toads or common enemies. Something people would bring up is the antagonists in the Bowser Jr.'s Journey side mode, the Best Fitness Friends. They were completely unique characters, but this could be rebutted with the fact that the devs outright confirmed that they're the same race as Midbus, which the devs might have used as a loophole to make them create new villains. Think about it. As someone who's played the side mode twice now, I do not remember the game ever mentioning this, that they were the same race. So why would they even need to bring that up? Now we're going to transition back more into the Switch era, and this is where things get even more messy. So in terms of sports spin-offs, we get Mario Tennis Aces, Super Rush, and Mario Strikers Battle League. Arguably, these are pretty basic and simplistic compared to the 2000 ones. Not many unique elements, and Battle League especially has been toned down in terms of the edginess. Obviously part of that is just because it's not really as big in culture as compared to back then, but it was still part of the charm and style Strikers had, and is still very lacking now with Battle League. Although there are a few unique characters. Firstly, in Super Rush, people argue that the Firebird, Snowman, and Knight are original characters, which, yeah, they are. Even then, it's probably just me, but the designs still feel very generic and simplistic. They feel like something I'd see from a regular Mario enemy, not a boss, if that'd make any sense. Although the Snowman I do think is an exception, he's pretty cool. Outside of them, the spin-offs don't really have any unique real modifications of characters existing, just basic stuff like giving a Koopa Troopa a robe, which isn't violating any potential mandates since they're not modifying the character, just giving them accessories, which is something the developers can do since this is the main loophole they use to make quote-unquote unique characters. Then Origami King happened. This was just the undeniable proof that yeah, there are mandates of some sort on Paper Mario. Mr. Tanabe went on record, yeah, we can't make original characters inside the Mario universe. We can modify them slightly, but we can't cross a line set by an IP team. But then there was Battle League with this guy, and then Sparks of Hope with this. Okay, I really can't do this anymore. I think it has to be Paper Mario exclusive. The other stuff is very light mandates to the point where it's just brand recognition. There are IP teams for games like Mario Rabbids, and likely all other Mario game devs have it, but for some reason, Paper Mario has to have it so hard on them. I used to think otherwise, but the deeper I look into this, it becomes more obvious. Yeah, recent sports spin-offs are definitely a lot more tame and have less charm, but is that really because of mandates, or rather the devs and how they want the game's direction to go? Let's actually go through some of these games and debunk what can be debunked. We know for a fact that it seems to affect Paper Mario at least heavily. Sticker Star was when it was first brought up using only characters from the Mario world. This doesn't include pre-existing characters from Paper Mario either, just mainline Mario. We can also see this happen more lightly with other spin-offs. Mario Tennis Open originally had Sunshine NPCs as background characters, but they were switched out to just Toads. Could have been for a completely different reason, but it's likely due to brand recognition as Nintendo was phasing them out alongside the Kremlings in Mario games. Brand recognition in general seems to be what the case for most of these are. They only really seem to be actual mandates for Paper Mario. 3D Land and World are prime examples of brand recognition. The direction with those games was to be a Mario game at its core in 3D, not a traditional wacky 3D Mario with unique worlds and stuff. It does have creativity and unique characters, but they intentionally seem to make it more generic to appeal to a casual audience. Remember, this is the Wii U we're talking about. Mario vs. DK. These are seen as the most bare-bones Mario games in terms of creativity when it comes to the latter entries. Well, Tipping Stars for Wii U was basically just a tech demo. It was made in HTML, meaning it could be played in a web browser, to show third-party developers how easy it was to make games for the Wii U. It likely wasn't supposed to be a groundbreaking installment in the franchise. Same with Mini Mario and Friends Amiibo Challenge. A neat little title to use an amiibo. Mario & Luigi Dream Team exists! Paper Jam was confirmed in a developer interview that it was more tame and had no unique characters because it was a choice by Alpha Dream themselves, not some dev team. Mario Odyssey had unique species, a story with more substance, and more things in general that are not very Mario. Odyssey was very creative and a big change of pace from 3D Land and World. Playing it safe with new Super Mario Bros. Style environments, it had completely different, unique environments, races, bosses, and a lot more. If mandates existed, there's no way they touched 3D Mario. As for scrapped concept art of Odyssey, from the art we've seen, I think it's more likely the artist would have known what's allowed and what isn't. So while certain designs may have not made it into the final game, it can't be because of mandates and more so because it's just concept art. You know, concepts. The sports games, as I mentioned, do have some random new characters, although they are a visible downgrade in creativity and such. I think this is just more so to give a straightforward playing experience and, of course, brand recognition. Also, this is a bit random and something I just recently found out, but it really doesn't help that Camelot, the creators of Aces and Super Rush, only has around 30 employees. I recently found this out and it's pretty shocking. You'd think that a studio that gets a ton of money from working on such massive hits would, you know, be able to expand a bit. Obviously, current Nintendo employees assist them as well, but if you look at Super Rush's credits for example, when it has 200 people credited, but when you cut out the studio who made the CGI animation, the testing and debugging team, the localization teams, and get to the actual developers, there's only 50 from Camelot and only 20 from Nintendo, which is a normal amount, don't get me wrong. But if they want to consistently make sports games with not having bare minimum content with fans complaining about lack of charm and creativity compared to older games, they should probably expand more. Unrelated rambling aside, I want to talk about the Mario movie. I think regardless of whether you support the mandates or you hate them or you don't care at all, we can all agree the movie is an exception. It is a major moment for Nintendo and Miyamoto, who were carefully involved in every step of the process. It's almost like creating a strict set of guidelines for a new IP that doesn't exist yet. Yeah, they obviously don't have complete creative freedom, but it's not like they couldn't add specific stuff. I will address, yeah, there was concept art featuring Toadsworth and Toadette, but as stated from Ed Scruder, the head of story on the film, Nintendo would just suggest, oh, instead of using this, you should just use this instead. Again, it's more of a brand recognition thing rather than a mandated thing. Toadsworth, while it would be really cool to see in the movie, it just wasn't exactly necessary and Nintendo wanted to just keep regular Toads as they would have been portrayed in the Mushroom Kingdom. The Rabbids games, while they did have an IP team, at least confirmed to have one for Sparks of Hope, it wasn't nearly as strict as Intelligent Systems, at least as it seemed to be a more case-by-case situation. Remember, this is one of the first times in the Switch era where a big company like Ubisoft, where Nintendo has to make sure a Mario game is made properly. It feels like another case-by-case scenario like it did with the Mario movie. If the IP does become an ongoing series that gets more and more entries, perhaps it'll have a more quote-unquote traditional IP team if that makes sense. With pre-existing characters, we can see this incredibly visible line that designers can't cross when it comes to modifying characters. They can add accessories to pre-existing enemies, but can't modify the characters themselves. You can get a Koopa and give it a robe, but you can't make it more sinister looking, like changing its eyes or skin tone. It's these little nods to a time where developers could do whatever they want with these characters, yet they can't go fully out with completely different looks. Although it is more likely these fall under brand recognition, these limitations are so visible and push so hard on the developers, they feel like mandates. So what do I think the Mario mandates are after all of this? The Mario mandates are a mandate where developers cannot modify base models of existing models, no changing Toads, and Intelligent Systems IP team doesn't allow variants of existing characters alongside characters that touch on the Mario universe. For example, Intelligent Systems isn't capable of getting away with making variants of pre-existing characters, but studios like Ubisoft, Alpha Dream, and Camelot can to a bigger extent. They can even make completely new characters that fit into the Mario universe, unlike Intelligent Systems. What people confuse the mandates for is brand recognition. When people see the new Super Mario Bros. Style being thrown all over the place in every possible Mario game, that's not a mandate necessarily, that's Nintendo trying to make sure their brand is as recognizable and appealing to the casual audience. It's not as enforced as mandates, and in specific cases they won't even follow basic brand recognition to make a game more unique and creative, like Super Mario Odyssey. While all of the actual mandates are just part of brand recognition, they're pushing specifically those things so hard they feel like mandates. It's unclear if all studios must comply with brand recognition. It's likely more enforced on second and third party studios to prevent them from getting too liberal with the IP as seen in the late 2000s before they were created. Internally at Nintendo, EPD, Nintendo seemed to follow brand recognition but isn't as worried about it currently as seen with Super Mario Bros. Wonder and Odyssey. To summarize what I personally believe, the Mario mandates consist of A. No making modifications to pre-existing characters in the Mario world. B. No changing Toads. And C. Paper Mario cannot make variants of pre-existing characters alongside making new characters that touch on the Mario universe. And yes, a variant of a character and a modification of a character are separate things. Here's an on-screen example. So are the mandates real? Yeah, but not in the way you likely thought. In a hypothetical world where all of this was the confirmed definitive answer for all of this, the only mystery remaining is something we've already been wondering for about a decade now. Why is Paper Mario specifically getting such harsh treatment when it comes to the IP team? Is it because of what happened with Super? Is it because of someone at Intelligent Systems? Or does Miyamoto just really hate Paper? We really don't have the full answer yet. We'll just have to hope interviewers keep nagging developers every 4 years about it. So am I wrong about all of this? Of course, there's always little details that could disprove anything with this, but I think this is one of the most concrete answers we have as of now. I know some people get randomly heated over the existence of them, but let's please try not to start any debates. It's just my views on the whole situation. After all of this, it's only making the next Paper Mario game, which should release in 2024 if they're still following the full year schedule, a lot more interesting, which I believe I'll have a video out on that sooner than later. Now I want to get real for a second. This has been by far the most mind-numbing, dreadful, and confusing things to research for. There is so much stuff to look at, and any small detail that could contradict a single point. I went into this intrigued at the idea of the mandates. They were an interesting concept, but now I do not want to talk about it anymore, honestly. I don't even get why all of the discussion about it is heated 50% of the time. It's just Mario characters being limited to what silly characters they can use and so on. If I didn't specifically mention a certain game clearly affected by this in some way, I'm very sorry. I wanted to make this video explaining all that I could, but I really do not have the capacity for that right now, nor do I have my head fully wrapped around this all. I might completely disagree with myself about this in a few months. Who knows? I just want to talk about literally anything else. You know what? I'm just going to talk about strange disappearances of second-party Nintendo devs as an excuse to cry about Alpha Dream again. My brain is completely fried, and I'm going to talk about literally anything else. Good night, everyone, and I hope you have a great day.